Good evening, everyone. I am definitely not Brian here. So it's really hard to be the very first one to be up here on a new format and have to go after people like Brian and Dwayne and try to come up with questions for a classroom. My last time teaching an adult class, I was in a preacher's training program over 20 years ago. So it's been we just did the high school class, but I feel a little better in the high school class. It's a little more confined and it's not so open and not so many eyes looking at me right now, but we'll be good. So we're in the parables, and tonight we're going to be talking about the parable of the sower. So the parable of the sower is well-known scripture. It's in both Matthew, Mark, Luke. From tonight's passage, we're actually going to be in Mark's account. So if you open up your Bibles, we're going to be primarily there. We're going to flip it back and forth. Hopefully everybody had the chance to come up with questions or come do the questions. I sent Brian my email later, and I said, Brian, I'm struggling with questions. He's like, I know. So hopefully I say to say that hopefully the questions were a little thought-provoking. My job with this class is not to reinvent the wheel. It's not to try to come up with new metaphors, new ideas, and try to come up with a whole new repertoire of what the parable of the sower is. But I do think it's a great passage, lots of things to learn from there, and we'll start from there. So, Mark chapter 4, starting in verse 1, says, And he began to teach beside the sea, and a very large crowd gathered about him. So he got into the boat and sat into the sea, and the whole crowd was beside the sea and on the land. And he was teaching them many things in parables, and in his teaching he said to them, Listen, behold, a sower went out to sow. So, as we talked about on Sunday, one of the things we want to do with our parables to really understand them is to really get into the context of where they were. How was this parable? Who was the original audience? So, in my search of my studies here, the last time that this parable was taught was done by, I'm blanking on his names, preacher before Dwayne. Before Dwayne. Adam. Yes, it was Adam. So Adam's kind of brought me onto this. I've never heard this before, so maybe some of you haven't. But there's been some speculation that the parable is taught in this place called the Cove of the Sower. And the Cove of the Sower is next to the Sea of Galilee, in a little spot there. And it's kind of hard to see on this map. But throughout some more pictures, Pharaoh Jenkins, throughout his travels, throughout Israel and where he's going to, has gone to this place, and a lot of interesting things are there. So I kind of just want you to get your minds in this place, to look at the landscape, looking at where they were. So this is looking westward, the little cutout right there, the little palm tree, that's where the cove is. This is on the water. This is all from Pharaoh Jenkins' pictures here from a couple different years. But imagine yourself sitting on the land there, and Jesus is on a boat. This kind of gets you better. I like this picture a lot. So you can kind of see how the landscape might have been. So this cove right here, the little U shape, is kind of where they had ideas that this is possibly one of the places that Jesus could have taught. But I want you to notice all the agriculture going around, all the plants, all the crops, all the things right there. But beyond that, I want you to look at how things were kind of laid out. What would the original audience, how would they perceive this lesson? How would they even hear this lesson? Well, it's funny I ask. So a gentleman by the name of Billy B. Crosby tested some experiments and concluded, based on the acoustics of where's the back button? The acoustics of the cove here, that it is possible that a crowd of about 5,000 to 7,000 could have heard Jesus just using his regular voice. Now, this is all pure speculation. There's no confirmations within the scriptures about where this might have been or where this is the actual place. But I kind of wanted to get our minds just in the place, in the context of where this was. So let's get into let me talk about this first. So the more I studied about this class, the more I thought about, well, what is a sower? I didn't really know what a sower was. So I always thought a sower and a farmer were synonymous. So I thought they were the same thing. And while there is some overlap, there is some specific differences between a sower and a farmer. A sower is specifically one person who plants seed, or it's a machine or tool who plants the seed. A sower, its only concern is with planting the seed. Whereas a farmer, his job is a person who is cultivating the land. We often mix these in between, and there is mixture in between the farmer and the sower. But in the context of the story, he's talking about a person who is literally sowing the seed. So I thought that was just an interesting, just different context of how to look at it here. Because in the story, you're going to see that seeds have life. There's nothing better than looking at a little seed. I thought about, Terry's not here tonight, but there's a bunch in here who like planting. I'm not a planter. I'm not into that stuff, but I can appreciate what goes into the ground has life. So for the class here, I want us to understand that seeds have life. So before we start our passages, I want to bring up our first question. And the first question was, list a few Old Testament passages that talk about this idea of planting in or using seeds. To me, there's a plethora of ideas and thoughts that you can kind of put into these ideas, especially Old Testament passages. So what passages did you guys maybe come up with? All right, we have two up here. Oh, they have mics coming.
When God created plants in Genesis 1, he created them to actually have seeds at that time.
Awesome.
So the seed proposition was from the very beginning.
Right. Yeah. So that was my first one too. So since you said it, so Genesis 1 verse 11 and 12, and God says, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and the fruit and trees bearing fruit, which is in their seed, each according to its own kind, that's on the earth, and it went to sow. And the earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kind, and trees bearing fruit, which is their own seed, each according to their own kind. And God saw that it was good." So great. That was the first one I had too. Anybody have anything else that they kind of thought of? Rachel.
I had Ecclesiastes 11:6. In the morning sow your seed, and at evening withhold not your hand, for you do not know which will prosper. This verse reminds us to spread the word to everyone, and we can't predict who will respond or how God will work.
Yeah, great. So we're going to really get into that, and especially in this lesson here, how there's different types of soils, and not every soil is the same. So respecting that seed is going to be crucial here. Anybody else on Old Testament passages here? So I came up with, Will's got one.
And Carol.
Oh, and Carol, I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure if this is specifically planting seeds, but I remember as like punishment for letting sin enter the world, anyone who wants to grow has to work for it.
Okay.
Kind of thing, at the end of the Adam and Eve story.
Great.
Hosea 10, verse 11 and 12, or 12 and 13. Sow for yourselves righteousness, reap in mercy, break up your fallow ground, for it is time to seek the Lord till he comes and rains righteousness upon you.
Right. Awesome. So there's tons. Do I have more? Oh, Herb's got one. So there's obviously, I'll talk when he gets it. There's obviously tons and tons of passages about this idea of planting seed, growing seed. Seed is for life, how planting is used in different contexts here.
Exodus 23:10, "For 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in its yield, but the 7th year you shall let it rest and lie fallow, that the poor of your people may eat, and what they leave the beasts of the field may eat. You shall do likewise with your vineyard and with your olive orchard." So it was the first time that he gave them the idea of 6 days resting on the 7th, and that sowing, would be something good to do, but they would need to rest.
Yeah.
1 year they would need to rest so that save up for later.
Right. So you're going to see this all throughout the passages here, all throughout the Old Testament. Before I ruin somebody else's, anybody have any other ideas on planting or passages that you might see in the Old Testament? So I came up with a couple others. So obviously planting in the Old Testament, even the New Testament, has both agricultural and specific spiritual implications. So Genesis 1, we're talking about the agricultural side. Genesis 2:15, the Lord took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work and keep it. Clearly, from the very beginning of the world, the creation, God was intending man to tend to the fields, to work the plants, to work for the crops. So I found that very interesting, kind of just going through this lesson here. But beyond that, I also think, there's Ecclesiastes 3. Ecclesiastes 3 says, for everything there's a season, for a time for everything that matters under the sun, and a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, and time to pluck what is planted. So just this idea of using plants, what is planted, for our nourishment, essentially, here. And there's a time for everything. But more than that, that there's this idea of planting in the Old Testament is as far as the seeds of what will become. So I came up with seeds of the offerings of descendants. Genesis chapter 12, verse 7 talks about the descendants of Abraham and how his seed, his descendants will receive the promised land. Genesis 15, verse 5, and he took outside and he said, now look towards the heavens and count the stars. If you're able to count them, he said, so shall be your descendants, or your seeds, as some translations say. So there's this idea that seeds will be passed on. So remember, seeds have life. So if we're talking about life giving on to the next generations here. And then seeds is God's promise. 2 Samuel 7:12 talks about the promise that was given to first Abraham, to Isaac, and so on, to David. And then ultimately, the seed will be fulfilled in Jesus. So I just thought that was kind of interesting, kind of a parallel how the people who are hearing the message then, this is not an unusual thing for them to hear. They understood the concept of farming. They understood the concept of growing their own crops. You know, I don't know how many of us are farmers nowadays. We just go to the store and get our grains in our food and our breads. But this would be a common thing. This is an understood, they knew how to grow. They understood the idea that seeds do produce life here. So let's kind of start getting into our first part of our text. And we're back in starting in verse 4, and it says, he sowed, and some seed fell along the path. And this is Jesus talking to the crowd. He said, some seed fell along the path, and the birds came and they devoured it. And other seeds fell on the rocky ground, where it did not have much soil. And immediately it sprang up, since it had no depth of soil. And when the sun rose, it was scorched, and since it had no root, it withered away. And then verse 7 says, other seed fell among the thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no grain. And other seeds fell into the good soil and produced grain, growing up and increasing and yielding 30-fold, 60-fold, and 100-fold. And he said, he who has ears, let him hear. So this kind of stops the parable here. So as he continues on, he's going to start talking to his disciples and to a smaller group here. But I wanted to talk about who are some of the main characters, main ideas you're getting to the story just from these first few verses here. So obviously one of the main characters is the sower. He is the one who's taking the seed and he's scattering the seed around. His job is to throw the seed. It is to land in the good soil, but his job is to plant the seed. His job is to throw it out. Obviously, the seed is the one that is the main cause here. It is one that is needing certain things, but it is one that's being thrown out onto the ground here. And then the soil is the one that's receiving the seed. If you take out one of these people, you don't have a complete chain of reaction. If you take out the seed, there's nothing to plant. If you take out the sower, there's no one to plant the seed. If you take out the soil, there's nothing for the seed to root and to make harvest. So these are some of the main points he's trying to get at. But also, there's lots of subpoints here within the first few verses. You know, the birds, they come and eat the seeds. The rocks are the ones who block the seeds. Thorns, the ones that choke the seeds out. And then there's, of course, the good soil and the good crops. I like the way that it kind of breaks things down a little bit here. This is kind of known as one of those model parables where a lot of the parables are kind of built off of, and I like that it's kind of laid out this way with the points and the subpoints, and trying to understand that this imagery that he's trying to get past here with this agricultural type of language. All right, and I want to talk about all these different little main points here, and all the subpoints will kind of fit in as we go along. So the 4 different soils. So I talked to, where's Mike? Mike's over here. He's like, I hope you don't go too much. Well, this is my idea of too much here, and I thought it was a little funny with my little pecking bird here at the seeds here. But the New American Standards calls the path. It calls it the side of the road. It's this idea as the sower's throwing the seeds, he's throwing it into the ground. And so imagine there's a walking path. The path is compacted, it's hard, it's not going to penetrate the soil at all. So as he throws these seeds, the seeds are not really getting into the soil, they're just on top. So what do the birds do? The birds come and eat the seeds here. And then he gets into the rocky soil. Now again, I'm not a planter. Some rocks are good for planting. I didn't realize this. So a lot of the rocks are good for planting. But in this context, the rocks are, we imagine, I guess I imagined in big boulders at first. And the rocks are kind of just bouncing off the boulders. I think we have to think about it so that the rocks are underneath the soil. If they're underneath the soil, the seeds will penetrate, they'll germinate, but they're not going to really get time to root. There's not a lot of depth they can go to in there. I remember as a kid going through and having to dig up rocks whenever we planted crops or planted trees in Arizona, and it was not a fun thing. But the same thing is for the thorns. So these are actually, so I try to find pictures of what thorns might look like in that time. And it's this idea, it's not these little briars that we would normally kind of get in Florida or some of our other states where they're kind of just a little prickles thing. These things are big, they're big bushes, but they're technically a plant. So that as the sower's throwing the seeds here, the seeds are going into the earth, they're getting planted, they're getting nutrients, the things that they need, but eventually these invasive, it's Melinda's favorite word, we start talking about plants, and her favorite thing to say is about invasive plants, invasive this. Well, these are invasive plants, right? These things are just overcoming what the good plants are, and that's what the invasive things are in Florida as well. You know, we talk about invasive species or invasive plants in the Everglades. Same thing, same concept is here. Whereas if you have some kind of invasive thing, these thorns, while they are there, they're just going to choke out the good seed here, the good crops. And then the last soil we have is, of course, the good soil. This is a picture that I picked up. Again, hopefully Google did me right. But this is what a crop might look like in overseas. But just imagine nice, beautiful crops. I can't imagine there would be nice straight lines we have them today for our agriculture. But it's this idea that as the sower goes along, the idea is to get the seed into the good soil here. Do we have any comments for that first little section here? We're going to get back into the text, but anything stood out to you about the first few verses that he kind of brings out about the different soils or the seeds? All right, so we're going to get back into the text here. The text says, verse 10, and when he was alone, those around him with the 12, he asked about the parables. And he said to them, to you has been given the kingdom of God, but those outside, everything is in parables. Verse 12, so that you may indeed see, but not perceive, they may indeed see, but not perceive, and they may indeed hear, but not understand, lest they should turn and be forgiven. And he said to them, "Do you not understand this parable? How will then you understand all parables?" So this kind of gets into my second question here. And I kind of had to think about this for a while, how I wanted to word it. But why do you think the apostles were not understanding the story of the sower? Or do you think they were understanding? Maybe I was having maybe a not correct understanding of what the text was saying. But why do you think they were or were not having an understanding of the sower? Yeah, Will. Mary's that one. Hey, Brock, up here.
I'm not fully sure if I'm able to pinpoint exactly what it is, but honestly, I think it's a combo of people not being as intellectually informed back then, coupled with feeling the incongruence of the correlation between a surface level part of life
Right.
and the meaning behind it.
Right. Good.
Oh, some ideas I had were maybe they just weren't used to being taught in that
Yeah.
way. I mean, I can imagine as schoolboys or whatever, the scribe would get up and just recite verses to them and tell them what they meant.
Right.
And maybe it was just direct passages of the law that said do this and don't do that, and they weren't used to that. But also, I thought maybe all of them were seekers, or they wouldn't be with Jesus.
Yeah.
And maybe the idea that the understanding had to be provoked, or the curiosity had to be raised, and to go deeper into the subject. Maybe they didn't realize that other people needed that, and that they themselves would need it at a different level.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it's kind of things that came up as well, as far as this idea that I think kind of both Will and Mary. Oh, we have more? Oh, Rachel, Brock. Oh.
I was going to say it's for us. It was opaque. They couldn't understand it. So he explained it for all of us and for everybody since that time.
Yeah, it's easy for us nowadays to kind of look back and have a kind of a retrospective idea that the whole story, looking at it in the big picture.
Yeah, I also think of what they're expecting, right? Like, the Messiah is here. Like, this is the moment. The kingdom is coming. He's going to take over and overthrow the Romans, and we're going to be the military power and all that. And then he's talking about farming stuff. I think it may have just caught them off guard from what they were expecting.
Rachel, you have one?
I think that with the spreading and the different kinds of soils and stuff, that could be. I don't think they fully understood that the kingdom of God is for everybody.
Yeah.
And not just for the Jews.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all. Oh, we have one back here too. Yeah, so some of those things are all the things I came up as well. Scott. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, most of them were probably fishermen. Looking at the application of planting and understanding the concept was, maybe something that didn't really ring a bell.
Yeah.
So just a matter of knowing and starting to understand, perceiving what that application was.
Yeah, I didn't really think about that this idea that some were planters and some were more the hunter-gatherers. And maybe they didn't really understand this idea of tossing the seed and planting the crops, because maybe that wasn't their part of their jobs. It's really good. Got one up here.
This might not be on target at all, but whenever I read this, there's a couple things that do happen. He does explain it to them.
Yeah.
And he explains it to them privately in a more intimate moment. I don't get everything I hear the first time either. I think this is setting a pattern of just for the way the life of a Christian's going to go.
Yeah.
What you might hear the first time, you might not get it for years, or you might get it when we're meeting like this with other brethren and we discuss these things.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing a pattern that's going to continue on in the way we learn a little bit here too. And that's part of this is, You're not going to get everything the first time you hear it. I don't.
Yeah. Yeah, so I try to put myself in that context of being there in the crowd, right? I'm not part of the 12, not part of the close few within Jesus. And I go, does my mind understand the concepts that he's teaching? And I was like, well, I can understand the concept of spreading the seed, and I can understand the concept of planting, but am I getting the full picture? So I don't know if some did or some did not. But what they were looking for is, I don't know if they were supposed to get the full picture. The full picture wasn't clear to them yet. And that's what he also continues on with saying in the next couple of verses here. So I came up with a couple. So hearing and understanding. Just because you're hearing something does not mean you're understanding something. I hear a lot of things. Doesn't mean I understand a lot of things. But the parables were kind of new to them. So one of the things we talked about in our Sunday class on the parables is how to kind of make sure we're in context. So if looking at all the different passages from Matthew, Mark to Luke, and how they kind of vary, I kind of got this idea that these idea of parables were kind of a new concept to them. They didn't understand how these stories were going to interact with them, how Jesus was teaching with them. So maybe this idea that the parables were just new to their ears. And then we already kind of mentioned it, but the concept of, well, what was being actually taught here? The concept of the kingdom, but it's not the kingdom that they once knew as Jews. It's the kingdom that is to come. It's the kingdom that is now being taught by Jesus of the things that are going to be happening here. And I also thought about the fact that they're new followers to Jesus. I didn't even think about how much time has passed. I try to look at some datings of the different chapters when the apostles are called to when we are here. The idea is it's not very long. Maybe a year, maybe a little longer, maybe a little shorter. But the still idea that they're still new to following Jesus. They're still new to trying to understand these new concepts here. All good comments here. But at least for us, we have the advantage of having the complete Word of God, and we have the advantage of Him explaining the story to us, which, again, I can't imagine myself trying to go from the crowd and trying to really understand what the message was. So let's get into what the actual teaching of Jesus was. Jesus explains, so verse 14, he says, the sower sows the word. So the job of the sower is he's spreading the seed. The concept is he's not spreading seed, he's spreading little Bibles. He's spreading the word. He's spreading the message that is going to be the kingdom here. Verse 15, and those who are along, the ones along the path where the word is sown. They hear when they hear, Satan immediately comes and takes them away, and the word is not sown in them. So this idea that the ones who are sown along the path, as the sower sows the seed, he's throwing the seed, is that the little seeds on the ground, it's not really sinking in because Satan's the one that is blocking that right there. So they're not receiving the word. It's not really being sown in them. Verse 16, and he says, those who are sown in the rocky ground. And so these are the ones that are sown on the rocky ground. And to the one, when they hear the word, immediately receive it with joy. And have no root in themselves, but endure for a while. Then when tribulation or persecution arises on the account of the word, immediately they fall away. And I want to go right into the second one because we're going to talk about these two in a second. In verse 18 it says, the other ones are sown among the thorns. They are the ones who hear the word, but the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches and desires for other things enter and choke out the word, and it proves unfruitful. So that kind of gets us into my third question here, is what are some rocks and thorns that threaten to block and choke out the word in our lives? If we're understanding the parable as Jesus is explaining, all of these different soils, they're having different consequences of where they at. So what are some things that we can kind of get from the text? What are some things maybe in our own lives that are either rocks or thorns? Anything that causes you to sin? Okay. Yeah, Mary at the end. Go ahead, Ms. Phyllis.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that this is a very interesting to me because I've never been good at parables.
Yeah.
And so I'm really focused. Brian got me focused.
He does that to people.
Gave me some real good tips now when I read it. And I think a lot of times the things that we're unfocused on it, because I find some people are not even focused on their soul. I find it encouraging in his words that you just said, because we need encouragement because we see people, our loved ones, fall away from the word.
Right.
Because they become so concerned or having, some devastation in their life and things of that sort that they give up. I think, so many things happen to us in our lives, a death of a loved one, or seeing someone who's been very faithful and something tragic happens to them. So those kinds of things discourage us. And some people, we will fall away.
Yeah.
And until I really got into this, I understand he's given us, he was basically telling the apostles, because they saw this too, with their family, their loved ones, with people they came in contact, you've got to stay focused or you're not going to be able to endure some of the sadness that we're going to see.
Yeah. So since you had, I'll ask a question. So in those circumstances, do you think that some of the people are a part of the rocks? So if they're falling away right away, are they part of the rocks they're deeply rooted in the word, or did they fall away? Were they ever really founded in the gospel? So kind of makes these wheels start turning as far as, I think everybody in this room has seen people fall away, right? Especially when the tough gets going, the tough, what's the phrase, when the tough gets going, the going gets tough, or something like that. It's this idea that it's kind of just shallow in them. It's not really planted. They might be in the church pew, they might be here, but there's no depth to that. So, good points.
When I think of the ones in the rocky soil, I think of a lot of new Christians that are super enthusiastic and they're so excited, but maybe heaven sounds pretty or maybe hell sounds scary, but they don't really have a faith that's their own, and they don't really understand that it's a commitment, and that commitment requires change in their life. So, maybe it was someone raised in the church, and once they're away from their parents, you realize that faith was not theirs. They have a very shallow connection with God. And as far as the ones in the thorns, it is their faith. They do have that deeper understanding of the commitment, but maybe they've never been faced with any challenges before. I mean, plenty of us have gone, I'm sure most of us have not experienced anything like what other Christians in the world have experienced. And so to actually be faced with something, they did have those roots, but they don't know how to face those challenges once they reach. But the rocks remind me of a lot of the kids I grew up with. They were baptized and they were so excited. But the second they stepped away from whatever Christians they were with in that moment, they just didn't have any depth to that connection with God outside of that excitement in that beginning, that emotional feeling. They didn't have any knowledge beyond that. It feels good.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Oh, Tim.
Yeah. So in the Luke account, he mentions three things that are in our modern world. When he's explaining it, he says cares, riches, and pleasures of life. And I think that, we still see that today. I can chase all sorts of riches. I can worry about all these things that's happening around me. And the interesting thing about those thorns, there they are, they're growing too. They have life too in them, and it's life in the wrong direction.
That's right.
And it's a big distraction,
and
it takes over that way and just chokes out because you're pursuing some stuff that, on the surface looks pretty good, but
Yeah.
it's not got no meat. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
Some of the rocks I was thinking of might be false expectations.
Oh, yeah.
I'm
Great.
going to become a Christian, and now my life's going to be easy, and everything's going to go great. And then when it doesn't, and we face those tragedies like Phyllis was talking about, it's like, man, it just hits us like a ton of bricks. And Melinda mentioned that too. And then also shallow teaching, right?
Yeah.
If you just always are fed on the milk of the word, you never have any meat, you never get any depth in your relationship with God, then Christianity it's all laws, it's all rules to you. It's not about relationship, it's not about love and depth with God, and that will lead you to fall away eventually too.
Yeah, good point. All right, so I'm going to kind of speed along here so we can kind of get to the last, but I kind of had those the same ideas here. Verse 20, it says, "Those who are sown on the good soil and those who but those who are sown on the good soil and those who hear the word and accept it bear fruit. They're 30-fold, 60-fold, and 100-fold." So I said, and we'll kind of get to this. Maybe we'll kind of tie in question 4 and 5 here. If the goal of the seed is to be among the good soil, we kind of touched with this already. But if the goal is as the sower spreads the seed, how can we, or what are some ways we can actually yield more crops? Hopefully that question wasn't off the top of my head and it was kind of understood of where I was trying to get this idea. Ryan?
Well, to go back to the way you started out the class, we can be more than just sowers. Yeah. We can be farmers, and we can help to prepare the ground that the seed is going to be laid in by, as we've talked about in some of our evangelism classes and everything, by building relationships with people and helping them to understand Christ on a deeper level, but also have a relationship with us, and through us see our relationship with Christ and with God, and kind of get them off to a better start. Help remove some of the rocks and thorns, and set them up to be better soil.
So I thought about the same thing. So this is idea that we're all soil, right? In this concept that as we go through, I think Carol had one up here. As we go through the different people or different soils at different times in their lives. So as I look at my life and I go, well, I'm not a rocky soil. I have deep roots, but I also go, man, sometimes the things that I want and the things I do and work in life, it just just gets a lot, and just kind of just want you don't just want to hide in your little covers here. And I think that's a lie of the devil, right? It's something he's trying to tell you is that you're not going to be good enough. Your acts are not going to be good enough. Your works are not going to be good enough. Your yield is not good enough. So you might as well not yield anything at all. Yeah, go ahead.
That was kind of my point. That a lot of times we tend to apply this to new Christians.
Yeah.
Only, but it isn't just new Christians. It's every one of us can find ourselves. When you are a gardener, you constantly are having to amend your soil and adding different things to it. So that means Bible study. That means prayer. That means constantly refocusing your mind on the most important thing, which is God.
Great. Yeah, that's good stuff. We'll kind of get into our last little question here, since the 4 and 5 kind of tie in together, is what does this parable kind of teach us about the kingdom of God? If Jesus is spreading a new type of kingdom, what is this parable trying to teach us about the kingdom, what he's trying to tell us?
Dan? Yeah, I've got it too, Daniel. Oh. So I guess this answers both questions. But Jesus is telling us as the sower to be indiscriminate in spreading that seed. You just throw it out. There's a mystery. The sower doesn't know where it's going to land. But his goal is not to discriminate and only try to pick out the good ground to throw it on. He throws it everywhere. And that's how the kingdom is going to grow.
Right.
That's pretty much what I was going to say, that this is a kingdom that's open for everyone, because the seed is just liberally distributed, and also that it's a place we're expected to grow, not just stay in the same place.
Yeah. All good points here. Anybody else? Melinda's got one back here. Scott? We have like a few seconds left. 7:40. All right.
Knowing that he's talking to his apostles, especially, they're about to have to be the sowers in his absence. And it's kind of don't get discouraged.
Yeah.
Your job is to spread it. You can't control where it lands. Some of your outcomes are going to be good, some aren't. But don't get discouraged. Keep sowing.
Yeah, great job. Yeah, practical applications, we're both soil and we're also the sower, right? So we're making sure that we have ourselves, it's good soil producing crops here. But as we get roots, we're actually starting to spread that seed.
Let me add something real quick to what Brian mentioned. How many have seen a rock face and a little tree growing out of it? You never know. You might not be sowing on good soil. The seed can grow anywhere.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah. Thanks, you guys. Good class.